Welcome back to the channel. Today we're working on my Ford Ranger. It has a leaky rear pinion seal. So today I'm going to show you guys how to fix it. Let's get started. First thing you're going to want to do is jack up your truck and put it on some jack stands. Make sure it's nice and secure while you get under it. Then you're going to need to remove the 4 bolts holding on your drive shaft. You'll need a 12-point socket or an end wrench for this. It's always a good idea to use some lubrication to help get the bolts spinning easily. You're going to want to mark your drive shaft and your flange to make sure you get them lined up the way they were. Your drive shaft is most likely weighted, and if you put it on incorrectly, you'll have a very bad shake and wobble at high speeds. One of the bolts on the drive shaft was extremely difficult to get off, so I took a 12-point socket and a breaker bar and broke it loose, then finished it off with an end wrench. Once you've removed all 4 bolts, you can pull the drive shaft back and set it to the side. Once you take off the drive shaft, you're going to see a nut. You're going to want to clean this nut off first with a wire brush. Then you're going to want to count the exposed threads at the top of the nut, or take a micrometer gauge and measure how far on the nut is. Reason being, this nut tensions a bearing on the back side, and you want to try and get that nut to the same point as it was before. Otherwise, you can destroy the bearing. What you're going to see me do here is make a line on the nut and count how many turns it takes to get the nut off. I don't recommend doing this. It didn't work for me. I ended up having to just kind of go by feel on where to get that nut back onto, so I definitely do not recommend this. Once you have your measurements done, you can take a breaker bar and go ahead and take that nut off. The nut isn't very tight, so it's not too hard to get it off. Once you remove that nut, you can go ahead and pull the flange off. The flange should come off pretty easily. It's just sitting on some splines, and that's it. Now you can remove that leaky seal. What I recommend doing is taking a cold chisel and trying to buckle the seal enough that you can get the cold chisel underneath it to then pry that metal seat up, and then you can get some pliers on it. This takes a little bit of work to finagle it out of there, but it's not too difficult. Be warned, as soon as that seal comes off, there's going to be fluid dripping out, so it's a good idea to have a drain pan ready. I went ahead and let the fluid drain for a little while I cleaned the surface where the seal goes back onto. A wire brush, a scraper, and some rubbing alcohol or some brake clean works well for this. To get the seal back in, you're going to want to find a socket that is about the same size as the diameter of the seal. And then you're going to want to tap that in evenly. If you don't have a socket, you might be able to try a piece of pipe or some other round object that's about the same size. This also took me a little bit of time to get it in correctly and all the way seated down, but it has to be done. Once you get the seal on, you can go ahead and take the flange and put it back on. I recommend cleaning it and putting a little bit of grease on the splines. I used a rubber mallet to get it started. Then I used the nut and just tightened the nut down until the flange was all the way seated. make the same mistake as me and you don't know where the nut was on when you took it off, here's what I recommend doing. Tightening the nut down until the flange is completely seated. Then spin the flange back and forth, take the e-brake off, and if the wheels spin pretty easily, then you're good. If they're really difficult to spin with the flange, then it's too tight and you need to back the nut off a little bit. Once the flange is back on, you can go ahead and reattach the drive shaft. Line up your mark with the mark on the flange. Put a little bit of Loctite on the bolts so that they don't come loose while you're driving, and go ahead and tighten them down. Then go ahead and refill your differential. You lose some fluid when you change the seal, so you want to put a little bit of fresh fluid in there. Then if you take some brake clean and clean the area where the fluid was leaking onto, it will dry, and so you can tell if it continues to leak. If you enjoyed the video or found it helpful, please be sure to subscribe.